This is Lane DeFries. Today's date is July 25th, 2022. It's 9:45 a.m. here in Denver, where I am, and in Worland, where Peggy is located. And we thank you, Peggy, for adding to the oral history collection of the Washakie Museum and Cultural Center located in Worland, Wyoming. We have two goals. First, that our class of 1960 tells what life was like for kids and teenagers in Worland from about 1941 to 1960. The second goal is that we share how growing up in Worland impacted our adult lives. So there are two questions that we ask everybody that give an introduction to the interview. So what is your full name, including your maiden name?
Peggy Ann Steele Porter.
Was there another name or a nickname that you were known by during your Worland days?
No, not nickname. I had a previous marriage. So do you want that name?
Not unless you want to share that.
Okay, yeah.
So we know, as we mentioned earlier, you are now making this recording from Worland, Wyoming.
Right.
If you weren't born in Worland, how old were you when your family arrived and when you left?
I was 11, and in the 5th grade, it was 1952. And we moved here, I think, in November of that year. And so I was in 5th grade. And we, as 5th graders, went to the middle school because Southside was just being built and it wasn't finished. And then when it was finished, we moved over as the first class in the Southside school.
Okay. And then did your family leave Worland or did you just stay there?
No, my parents lived here the whole time, 48 years. I at one time moved to Douglas for about 7 years and then back here.
Okay. And what brought your family to Worland?
My dad was in the meat business, cattle business, and he worked for Triangle Packing here. He also owned a sale barn.
Oh.
In the later years, he owned the sale barn here.
Was your home in town or did you live outside the city limits?
It was in town, on the south side of town. It was a new area. Houses were 2 years old. They were all built in 1950. And my folks bought that house fully furnished, which is kind of unusual. You don't see that today.
Oh.
And they lived there until they passed.
If you were to close your eyes, what do you remember about the sights, the sounds, or the smells?
The main thing I remember was I would walk to town down 8th Street, and we always had these worms that hung from the trees. Do you guys remember those? And I don't know what they were or where they went, but I haven't seen them in years and years and years. But I'd walk down the middle of the street because they just hung off the trees. And that's really the main thing I remember. I thought that was so odd.
That is odd. I think we called them bagworms.
Oh, were they?
I don't know what the term was, but I just
Yeah.
Yeah, they were scary to children.
And they were pretty thick.
Yeah.
In the older trees as I got up toward Culbertson and closer to Main Street. You had to dodge them.
So do you have memories of the areas surrounding Worland, like the mountains, the Badlands, or the back roads?
I really don't. I don't recall that we went to the mountains. We weren't a camping family or anything, so.
You were a city girl there.
Yep. Yeah. pretty much.
Before we started this recording, you've chosen some topics that you'd like to share. So we'll go chronologically to make it easier for listeners to follow, and then take a look back at from an adult perspective.
Okay.
So the first question, what do you remember about your childhood prior to starting first grade? This would have been from about 1941 to September 1948.
We lived in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. That's where I was born. And at age 5, I started kindergarten. And shortly after I started, I was diagnosed with rheumatic fever. There was no penicillin at that time, I guess. The only way to treat it was to put me to bed, flat on my back. And I spent a year at the age of 5. I have no idea how my mother kept me there, because I don't remember being sick, but I had a murmur that you could hear with the naked ear. And so the doctor said, well, you got to put her to bed and she's got to stay flat and it'll heal. And so I was in bed for a year. And of course, there was no TV back then. Mom had to invent games and stuff that I could do laying down to keep me occupied. And then I remember the doctor coming in about after 8 months, and I could sit up for 15 minutes a day. And so that put me a year behind in school, because the next year I was over it, but I couldn't go to first grade because it was all day. And I had to rest and take a nap in the afternoon. So I started kindergarten again as a 6-year-old. So that put me a year behind. And then in first grade, we moved to Riverton. My dad owned a packing plant there. And I went to first grade partly there. And then we moved back to Gearing, Nebraska. Excuse me. And I went through until 5th grade there. My 3rd grade teacher got a brain tumor and she passed away in surgery. And then my 4th grade teacher, that was the year of the big polio scare. And she got polio. So I had some kind of traumatic things as a child, I guess. And then we moved here when I was in 5th grade.
You were well aware of what illnesses could do.
I certainly was.
Lives.
Yeah.
So when you moved to Worland, you mentioned the Southside School wasn't open yet. So
No, they were still building it.
So where did you go to 5th grade?
To the middle school.
Mhm.
And had Hilda Myers as a teacher. And she was kind of intimidating. And coming from Nebraska, I had not had any fractions yet.
Oh.
And they were pretty well into fractions here. So I was behind there. But she was very, very nice and really helped me to catch up.
Yeah. So you probably stayed after school, or?
I don't remember if I stayed after school, but she just, I was afraid in the classroom that it was going to be terrible, but it wasn't. She was very understanding that I hadn't had him yet. And
Took time to help you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she did. And then when I don't remember what time of year it was, the Southside was finished, and we moved over there and finished 5th grade in Southside then.
And did you still have Mrs. Myers? Did she move over? Did you?
Yeah. I believe she did.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your elementary years?
Well, I look back and they were going to perform an operetta. And I'm not a person that likes to be in front of people. But for some odd reason, I tried out for it and I got the part of the Blue Fairy and sang a solo. I look back at that and I think, why in the world did I do that? I wouldn't even think of doing that now. But for whatever reason, I did. And
And,
that was fun, but
and you
it
did
was
it.
out of character for me.
Good for you. Shows your courage.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
So then you went back to the junior high again
right.
for 7th and 8th grades.
Uh-huh.
And where were you for 6th? Were you
I,
were you still at Southside?
I don't remember.
Probably you were if you had been 5th grade there. Yeah.
They had 6th grade in the middle school.
Yeah.
I mean, in the elementary school yet then. I don't remember. That's changed around.
Yeah.
I
Some of
remember.
our classmates just said they were in 6th grade at the middle school, but maybe that was for the kids on the north side of town.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember Dr. Birkenkamp was our janitor and he was such a sweet man. I just loved him. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And what are some of your memories about middle school?
Uh,
Or junior high at that time, I'm sorry.
yeah, it was junior high. Um, I don't have, nothing just really stands out. One thing that I think about now, it would just blow the kids today away, is we had to wear dresses. We were not allowed to wear pants. And even when there was a football game right after school, we had to go home and change and then come back. And I can remember walking to school when it was so cold. And we had dresses on and my legs were just red by the time I got to school. It was cold. And we, I guess, weren't even allowed to put pants on under our dresses till we got to school. But
And
you
you
remember?
remember the marks that the boots used to make on our legs,
Oh, yeah.
our bare legs?
Yeah. Yeah, they did. Kind of a, yeah. Yeah, I just don't have any huge things in middle school, I guess.
Did you have any after school activities
Um,
years, or was that mainly in high school?
I was in Job's Daughters. I don't remember what age, but I loved that. And they had a drill team at that time, and I was on that, and I loved that. That was fun. I really liked it. Now they don't have Job's Daughters here anymore.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
haven't had for quite a while.
Well, then you moved on to senior high school, which was September 1956 to our graduation in May 1960.
Uh-huh.
So what are your special memories of those years?
Oh gosh, I don't know, just the sports, the football games, my Spanish class that I struggled in because I didn't learn the words as they came to us. I guess the Job's Daughters dances and those things.
Yeah.
Nothing just totally outstanding, I guess.
Did you help with any of the building the floats for homecoming or?
Yeah, I did. I was on I believe it was our sophomore float. I think Sandy Voss and I were on that in our formals, and yeah, that was fun. But I just don't don't remember a whole lot more.
And what about television? Did
Yeah,
you have television in your home?
we did. Probably when it first came out, because mom had not worked. And then when my little brother was 5 and I would have been 15, she went to work for the cable TV. So we did have TV.
Okay.
And I remember watching American Bandstand. I think it came on at 3 o'clock, and I think that was the first TV program of the day. I don't think it was on all day, certainly not all day like it is now. Um, but I loved watching American Bandstand, and Dad always watched Lawrence Welk with all the bubbles.
And the Lennon sisters.
Yes, yes.
And so when you were going to school, what were your parents doing?
Mom worked, like I say, at cable TV, and Dad worked at Triangle Packing at that time. And my little brother David went to a babysitter, but they arranged for me to have homeroom at the last period of the day, so that I got out of school early and went home and watched my little brother then.
Isn't that something, how accommodating the schools could be for
Yeah.
personal reasons?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Yep, they were. I had homeroom or study hall, I guess it was, that last period, so I could go home and get David and take him home and take care of him till they got home from work.
Well, that's interesting. So most of us in our class of 1960 have turned 80. And
Huh?
because of the COVID pandemic, we've had to postpone 2 60th reunions. Finally, we got together in person. And in getting together, we've talked a lot about our time, thanks to Zoom and your participation on the Zoom and emails and telephone calls and phones without operators, like when we were kids.
I worked as a
And
telephone operator.
you did?
I did.
Was that in high school?
No, it was after I was out of high school. It was in 65, probably. 64, 65. Yeah.
I didn't realize you had done that.
Interesting.
And could you listen in on conversations? Do you remember?
We could. We were not supposed to, however. It wasn't a good thing to do, but we could. Yep. Mostly we just, at that time, people could dial locally. We handled just long distance calls.
Oh, well, in your experiences of growing up in Worland, what created the most impact on your life? You've been doing anything in your adult life that you thought you would be doing as you were growing up, going through the
Yes.
school system in Worland?
I have. My lofty goal was I just wanted to be a wife and a mother. That's all my life. That's what I wanted to be, and that's what I've been.
So you continued to stay in Worland
Mhm.
after graduation and raise your children there?
Until 1969, and then my husband worked for the telephone company, and he was transferred to Douglas, and we lived there for 7 years, and then we came back here, and I've been here ever since. Came back here in 76.
And when you have conversations with your friends there in Worland and those that have moved away, do you feel that you had a happy childhood there in Worland?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you attribute that to?
Um, it was just close and safe. We played out at night in the neighborhood till dark, and nobody was ever afraid. Or we'd go over a block over on Park Avenue. Dennis Smith lived there, and just, quite a few of us that lived in that neighborhood, and we'd just play out there in the neighborhood till it got dark, and then we'd go home and ride our bikes wherever we wanted, no helmets. It's just, yeah, we had a pretty good, safe childhood.
And were you one that went to the Saturday matinees at the Kirby Theater?
Yeah, some. I don't think a whole lot. You could go with Mer's bread wrappers, I think, couldn't you? There was something with Mer's bread wrappers.
And Mer's being the bakery next.
Yes, yes. Wonderful, wonderful bakery. Bunch of us used to take our lunch money and we'd walk down to the bakery, and that's what we'd do for lunch. I don't know if our parents knew that. They might not have. But oh, that was such a good bakery.
And be back in time for class.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, it wasn't that far. We'd spend our lunch money on donuts and rolls.
And Mr. Mers never ratted you out.
No, no. There were quite a few of us that did that.
Yeah. Was there anything else you would like to talk about? Something that we haven't shared so far?
Well, let's see. As far as working and when I was in school, I babysat a lot. And I car hopped at Wilson's Drive-In
Wilson's
for
Drive-In.
25 cents an hour, and that's what you got for babysitting. We went to the Methodist church, and I was in the youth choir at that time. And that was fun. I enjoyed that. That's all I can think of, really.
Well, in closing, for generations to come that may listen to your story years from now, is there any wisdom you want to pass on to them? What would you want them to know? Think of your grandchildren, maybe.
Yeah. The world is so different now than when we were growing up. I think the main thing is for them to go to church, stay in church, and just use that as their anchor.
Everybody needs an anchor of some sort.
Yes, yeah. And that's a good one. And I have 13 grandchildren and 26 great-grandchildren.
Oh, Peggy.
So there's a bunch.
And are any in Worland?
I have two. My youngest daughter's two kids live in Worland. Her son is married, no children, and her daughter teaches first grade in Worland, and she has three darling little girls there, 7 and 3 and 1. So that's the only ones that are close. Then I have two grandsons in Powell, and they have 5 between them, 4 boys and 1 girl. And the rest of them are further away.
Well, they will be happy when they access your interview and hear more about your life in Worland. And Peggy, thank you so much for taking time today to share with us and share with the community.
You betcha. I just had a thought. years and years ago. Do you remember Snyder's Dairy
Yes.
on South Flat? And we went out there and bought our milk from Snyder's Dairy. And my granddaughter that lives here and teaches is married to Cliff Snyder's great grandson, I guess he would be. And they farm. So it's all just carrying on.
Absolutely.
But he had that dairy for years and years and years, Cliff Snyder. We
I
always
had-
went out there and got our milk.
I had forgotten all about that until you mentioned it.
Yeah.
Thank you for including them.
Yeah, you bet.
So we'll say goodbye unless there's something else you want to.
Well, I
Yeah.
can't think. I guess I had the one question, like while you were going to school, what were your parents doing and what did they do for groups? Do you remember they had the coconut dance group at that time? And my parents were members of this coconuts. I don't know how they got their name, but they'd take turns. They'd have dinners at their house and then they'd all go dance. And it was quite a big deal. And of course, then they had the bridge clubs and they played bridge. So that's what they did.
Do they still have the coconut dance clubs? in Worland?
No, it's been years and years and years. And Dad always had a horse, so he rode his horse and stuff. But yeah, that coconut dance club was kind of cool. The other thing I thought of, and I don't know how many people would remember this, when we moved here and bought the house on Thomas, our next door neighbor was a Dr. Mark Watson. And I don't know if anybody remembers him. He was here for quite a few years and he was our next door neighbor. So, but I don't hear any people talk about him at all. So I don't know if anybody remembers that he was here then, but he was.
It occurs to me that your grandchildren have no idea what American Bandstand was
Oh, I'm sure not.
and what Job's Daughters was
No,
and what, there was another one, Lawrence Welk. And
Yeah.
perhaps you can give more information so that people who can't even visualize what that is know what you're talking about. Lane, can you think of anything else? Peggy, can you think of anything else?
let me look at my notes here.
No, I learned so much. The coconut dance club, I had no idea. I'd forgotten all about the dairy.
I just have a few notes here. It ask if there was a community member that made a difference in your life. And I ran around with Marilyn Carroll some, and her dad was a huge influence in my life, Bill Carroll. They were, let's see it was called the Church of God at that time. And they were over on 7th Street, South 7th, right by the little cottage grocery store. Remember the little cottage grocery store? You don't remember that? Let's see, the Johnsons owned it. Remember Scotty Johnson? He was I think they were probably seniors when we were freshmen or sophomores. And his dad owned that little cottage grocery store, and there were all the little neighborhood grocery stores, which nobody would realize that now. I mean, we have one grocery store and that's it. But their church was right next door to this cottage grocery store, and they lived in the basement, and then they had church in the top of the house there. And Marilyn's dad, Bill, was kind of the associate pastor, I guess, there. And he was such a sweet man. And he really had an impact on my life. Let's see. That's kind of all the notes I made, I think. Is there anything on this page? I think that's pretty much all the notes I had. Kathy, anything?
What did you do in Job's Daughters? What was Job's Daughters all about? What was Lawrence Welk about? American Bandstand. I think those are all such code words for us. We can immediately hear and visualize and have feelings. But your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren,
You're right. They wouldn't.
even your kids don't have a concept of that. How would tell us more about those things?
Did you guys watch American Bandstand?
Of course.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and Dick
So
Clark.
when you say it, we immediately have reactions.
Right. Yeah. Well, Dick Clark was the host, and it was just they played teenage music, and they had all these kids that went there and danced, and you just listened to the music and watched them dance. And I don't know, it was an hour or 2 hour long program. I think about 3 p.m. it came on. And of course, we were the first ones, teenagers, when Elvis Presley came out too. That was a big deal for us, I think. Rock and roll. And my dad watched American Bandstand, and I liked it. It was more adult music, and they had a band and different singers. And it was probably more at that time, the older people liked it more. I watched it because Dad was watching it, but they did have some really good singers, the Lennon sisters, but it was just strictly a musical program, as was American Bandstand.
What about Job's Daughters?
What
What was
the purpose of it? I honestly don't really know. A lot of girls belong to it. We had meetings. You had to have a relative that belonged to the Masons in order to join Job's Daughters. So Dad did join the Masons just so that I could join Job's Daughters. And I know we had dances, we had the drill team, we had meetings. I honestly, at this point in time, couldn't tell you what the whole purpose was.
What were the meetings like? How were they different from just belonging to any girls' organization?
Kathy, I honestly don't remember. Isn't that terrible? I remember going to meetings, but I don't remember what we did in the meetings.
Oh, we wore Grecian robes and we had secret handshakes and everything. All the ritual was a secret.
Okay. So the Masons and all of that stuff was always very secret. Yeah. I just don't remember that part. I remember I love the drill team. I don't remember who led it. But I love that. It was fun. And we were in parades and stuff.
And what would you do? What were the kinds of drills?
Well, it was like any drill team, you know, they'd call out commands and you'd march in unison to whatever command they gave, you know, turn right, turn left, or however they did it. I can remember practicing over by the park. But, you know, just like, probably like a drill team would do today, they're not that much different. But you weren't in that?
I don't even remember the drill team,
Huh,
but I remember all the rituals for the meeting. The meeting was mostly rituals.
see, I remember going to the meetings, but I don't remember the meetings at all. But I would imagine it was, because Mason's was the same way. It was all very secretive, which is kind of strange to me when I think about it now. But, and then from the Masons, you could go on and belong to the shrine. And they did a lot of good stuff, the shrine. They brought the shrine circus here every year. They supported the Shriners Hospital for burn patients, and it's still in existence today. But the Shriners did a lot of good works.
Do you remember the Shriners that would participate in our parades?
Oh, yeah. In their little cars.
Their little cars, and didn't they have the red fezzes, those hats?
Yeah, they wore the fez. Tall red hat with the Shriners insignia on the front of it.
The black tassel hanging down.
Yeah, and we still sometimes I'll see some Shriners. I don't know if they're still active here, but they all have those little cars that they rode in and buzzed around along the parade route. Yeah. Anything else that?
No, I think that's those are my questions.
Yep. And you were in our neighborhood. Remember going to Thermop with you when was it your grandpa owned the hotel in Thermop?
Yeah.
And I told you about the time we were over there and you and I went walking and crossed this fence and there was a cave and this man came out of the cave and you didn't remember that at all. And it scared us half to death. We went running away. I'm surprised you don't remember that.
I probably blocked it out. It was
Yeah.
probably a trauma that I
Too
blocked.
traumatic.
It was too traumatic to remember.
Yeah, but there were little steps that went up the fence and down the other side. And then there was a little trail. And we were just went over the fence and walking on that little trail and there he was. We left in a hurry. Yeah,
Oh God.
that's all, except we had,
Lane, you're the one doing the interview. Do you have any other questions?
No, I learned so much today, Peggy.
you did?
Yeah, I did, because I do from every interview, because
Yeah.
people have different experiences
Yeah,
and so much I've forgotten, they bring to mind and I can say, oh, yes. And
yeah. And I think we had 3 drugstores. I know you guys in here have Reed's and Graham's,
Mhm.
but there was a Ricker's drugstore.
Yeah.
Remember Ricker's?
Yeah.
And I think it was Hall's possibly before Bill Ricker bought it. He was so funny. Bill, he had such a personality, but they were right there by Hake Agency. I think we had all three drugstores at one time.
Mm. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day and
Thank you.
your reflections, and
You
you've
too.
given us a rich history of your childhood. And thank you for sharing your stories.
You're very welcome.